I was the type of person that I didn't go to church to chill. Like that wasn't my purpose.
Right.
Like I can chill at home.
Right.
So I'm listening and I'm looking for enrichment, I'm looking for guidance, I'm looking for comfort, you
Mhm.
know? Because when you're living a hard life, regardless of what walk of life you come from, the main thing that I think a lot of people look to God for is comfort, some
Right.
reassurance.
Hola. Hey everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison and welcome to our Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. Before we get started, I want to invite you to the first Let's Start Healing event if you happen to be in the Atlanta metro area on March 21st. We're having a Qigong event led by a very dear friend, Janine Crowd. Janine is a practitioner of yoga, Thai yoga massage, massage of all types, Qigong, obviously. And she is going to lead us in body movements, deep breathing, meditation through body movements. It's going to be phenomenal. And we're going to have some surprises as well. It is at Vista Yoga in Decatur at 4:30 on March 21st. It's from 4:30 to 6:30. It's $10 at the door. And you can also reach out to me through email if you would like more information at Let's Start Healing Podcast at gmail.com. But we would love to see you, and it will be further proof of how we have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. Right after I started this podcast last year, a friend got in touch and she had an idea for an episode. And she suggested that I go out on a Sunday and I interview people on Sunday morning, people who were not in church, and ask them why they chose not to be in church. What was it that they chose to do instead of going to church, and why? And the idea was to reach people who are likely doing something very fulfilling as an alternative to going to church. So this is what they would rather do. This is what speaks to them and resonates with them on a Sunday morning. Because on Sunday mornings, we traditionally will think of church on Sunday. So that's not this episode. That is not what I did. But with the person that I'm talking to, in the early part of our conversation, we're talking about church and how church may resonate or may have resonated at one point in our lives and then didn't, and why. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to, because if we're going to go to church, we do want some spiritual food. And if we don't go to church, sometimes it's because we might think that we're not going to get the spiritual food that we really long for, or the connection that we really long for. And my guest today is my nephew. His name is John Russell Murchison II, but family affectionately calls him Russell. I'm laughing because we can also call him Little Russell. He's my brother's son. Russell is married with a family living in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. He is such a fascinating person for me. Of course, I'm biased, but we talk a few times a week. We probably talk maybe at least twice a week, maybe more, and then we'll text in addition to that. And we talk about such a range of things. And sometimes we can have such deep conversations that I really wanted to feature him on this podcast and speak to some of the things that he and I might talk about, or some things that relate to this podcast. And also, very significantly, speak to his own spiritual journey. He is actually the second nephew that I have interviewed on this podcast. I interviewed another nephew, Justin, several months ago. He's on episode 9, and Justin, I know, resonated with a lot of you all. Justin and Russell are 10 years apart, and they are very tight. And I am very fortunate to have nieces and nephews in my life that I have a really great relationship with, and we love to have real conversations. So this is one of those conversations with Russell. So I'm really, as always, with our guests, excited for you to meet him and to get to know him and to learn if some of the things that we talk about resonate as it just relates to life, because I think that we really want connection in our lives, and that is something that comes up throughout our conversation: connection and authenticity. So, one of my favorite people on the planet. Let's meet him. Let's get started, and let's start healing. Welcome, Russell.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, good. You know, I'm so happy that you're here. One thing that you've shared with me as I share my spiritual self with you,
hmm
you will let me know that you have an understanding of mysticism in the way that I might have, or other people might talk about mysticism and God in a non traditional way. Some things you might even agree with, and some things
Right,
you might not agree with. Your take is that's all good and that's all true. I get that, but I'm here now as a human being. So I have
right,
to operate as a human being.
right.
So talk about that for me.
Okay. I think the biggest thing about the way I operate in life is I try to make my life as easy as possible. And what I mean by easy, I don't necessarily mean it from like a lazy standpoint, but like from a stress-free standpoint. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be in a situation where I always feel like I'm overcome with my thoughts or overcome with my emotions, because I just want to have a clear head when I'm operating throughout life. And the reason why I feel that way is because I'm truly stuck in the moment of what's going on. Like if I don't know how to deal with what's going on at this point in time, there's no need for me to necessarily try to figure out the future without figuring out what's going on now. So
Mm-hmm.
when I come to that point, that's when I deal with what I'm dealing with. But I use my own moral compass and spirituality to guide me through that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost kind of like I have rules that I live by, not that I've written down or anything like that, but just ones that are ingrained in me.
To me, what you're saying is you're present, which is a really
Definitely.
high thing. Very, I mean, I don't know what more we can do than be present in the present moment. For me,
hmm
if I can be present, then I'm connected.
Growing up, I was always taught that God is everywhere, God is all around you. And
Mm-hmm.
so because that was the belief system and I haven't had anything to contradict that in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I use that. So I do feel like God is all around me and God is with me in whatever I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be good or bad. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
from the true standpoint of believing that God is all knowing. You know what I
Right,
mean? So
right, right.
you can't hide from God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like the same principle that I use with myself. Because I can't hide from God and God knows everything, I don't lie to myself, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
honest with myself about what's going on or how I feel or or what I think about something.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean I express it, but just within my own self, I know, what's true for me and true to me.
Do you lean on God?
I feel like I do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not one of those things where I have doubt. It's just I'm also one of those people that because I don't know something, I don't portray to know it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say I believe I do, I know that to be true for me. But that's me just guarding myself is to say, like, if say for instance someone's listening to this, I wouldn't sit up there and want to say, yes, that's true, because I know it. I don't necessarily know it. I just
Mm-hmm.
believe it, you know.
Well, how would you describe your relationship with God now as compared to how you grew up?
Growing up, I grew up Catholic. I grew up in the Catholic Church, but it was a little different experience because I went to a lot of churches. So I do kind of understand the difference between being in what would be quote unquote like a black Catholic church
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a different type of Catholic church, but they operate the same insofar as the rules. It's just the feeling was a little bit different. It felt like it was Catholic rules, but with a little bit of the, I don't want to, I don't want to put a denomination to it, but I'm in what we would consider the South. It's the East. I'm in Virginia, so
Mm-hmm.
you have like different denominations like Baptist or Pentecostal or so forth
Mm-hmm.
and so on that have a little more flair, a little more quote unquote soul,
Mm-hmm.
a little more performance and theatrics in it. It wasn't that from a um, sermon standpoint, but it was that from like, say, for instance, the choir or the flair people may have carried about them. It was just a little more jazzy than like a traditional Catholic church. I went to the Basilica of St. Mary's in downtown Norfolk, which is like a historic church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's been around for over 200 years. It was my first main church. Like I know I've been to churches before that, but insofar as the church you first remember as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
that's my church. That's where I took my first penance and learned about the body and blood of Christ. And it was just one of those things where thinking about God, it gave me structure more so than spirituality. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel like, I mean, as a kid, you don't know what you're really doing at that point in time, but it wasn't necessarily a spiritual connection as much as just guidelines and rules to go by in life.
You don't attend church every Sunday.
Mm-mm.
So what is your relationship like with God now? And so at that point, growing up, you were praying? Would
Yeah, I still pray.
you still
I
pray?
pray I pray every day.
Mm-hmm.
Pray every day and I pray throughout moments of the day, but my prayers are more like conversations.
Yeah.
The structure of a prayer for me will be me saying, like I'm telling myself that I'm talking to God,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing that God already knows I'm talking to him, whether I say I'm talking to God or not, it's more for me. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? To
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that I'm talking to him in this
Mm-hmm.
moment versus when I'm thinking and still feel like I'm talking to God. That's kind of like the difference between my prayers, but I pray every day. And there were just certain things that I learned in church. I learned that the church is the actual people, not the building. And
Mm-hmm.
when you think of it from that standpoint, a lot of people take the words that you learn in church as just, I don't know, like you'll listen to it, you'll hear it, you'll process it, but you don't really feel it or think upon like what that truly means. And so for me, in my experience, the people in the church would have different things that they would do that I didn't necessarily felt were not of God, but just they were people. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just not a follower and I'm not necessarily a leader. I just consider myself to be an observer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I look at what's going on and if I want to participate in something, I'll participate. If I don't want to participate in it, I won't participate in it. But I'm always looking at it, trying to figure out how it works or why people act the way they do or whatever the situation is. I'm just looking at it from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So just to kind of get back to how I feel about God, my religion went in a different direction when I got to high school. I was in a Bible study class. It was like a Wednesday night. We were learning about mortal sins and venial sins. And in Catholicism, they were just classifying the sins. Like, a venial sin is like telling a white lie or doing something that's not necessarily honest. It's
Mm-hmm.
more deceptive, to kind of, just for lack of a better term. And like a mortal sin would be like murder or something more extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And they were classifying these sins. And in Catholicism, you read your Sunday lesson like from a missal. It's not really like the Bible. It's not like people are in church with open Bibles. It's excerpts from the Bibles,
Right.
parables, stories that are told to kind of give you a lesson in life, which I don't see anything wrong with it. But I would always ask, if it's coming from the Bible, why don't we just read the Bible? So I was having all these questions, and
Mm-hmm.
the teacher at the time really didn't have true answers. She kind of felt unsure about it. Gave what a normal kid would, feel is a decent answer. But to me, I knew it wasn't a good answer. I knew she didn't know because it was a lot of, I'll get back to you. Maybe we can discuss this next week. That's a good question type thing. So it was cool. So I started talking about it with my mom,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom started thinking about it in a different way, and she started exploring other things. And so we started to go to more traditional black churches, and I'm not making it about race, just trying to give you a honest
Yeah.
idea of where I'm going,
Mm-hmm.
And we went to, one church that was like small and might have had a congregation of maybe 25 people, and most of those people were family,
Mm-hmm.
to like a big church that was almost, it wouldn't be considered a mega church by today's standards, but
Mm-hmm.
in that time, it was a huge church. Like, you got a congregation of thousands of people, and that didn't necessarily feel cool either. And
Mm-hmm.
then eventually we went to this church in my community that I thought it was a very good church. It was a non-denominational church,
Mm-hmm.
sort of, but it was still like a Baptist church, just to give you an idea what type of church it is. I was the type of person that I didn't go to church to chill. Like, that wasn't my purpose.
Right.
Like, I can chill at home.
Right.
So I'm listening and I'm looking for enrichment, I'm looking for guidance, I'm looking for comfort, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Because when you're living a hard life, regardless of what walk of life you come from, the main thing that I think a lot of people look to God for is comfort, some
Right.
reassurance, and
Yeah.
you want for lack of a better term, you want your salvation to be intact. That if you do pass today, or it's 2 weeks from now, whenever it is, that you're going to a better place. And so that was kind of like what my whole
Mm-hmm.
purpose for
Mm-hmm.
going to church, as much as I did. That's what it was.
Did
But
did you feel that you were getting the food that you wanted?
yeah, in the beginning, I definitely did. And
Mm-hmm.
then the shift kind of switched to money. It was a
Mm-hmm.
big push for tithes and offering. And that was around the time that Creflo Dollar and Leroy Thompson and some other pastors were preaching about prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
And, we would go to a Wednesday Bible study class, and at first it was about the Old Testament and the New Testament, and just kind of breaking it down geographically and what that was like in those times.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool. It was interesting. I'm looking at rivers and lakes and bodies of water, and places where Jesus would have been, and what it would have been like, and what the climate was like. It
Mm-hmm.
switched from that to like videos of them preaching about prosperity, and how everybody can be prosperous if we just keep giving this money. And
Yeah.
it was just a total shift. It just threw me all off. And as
Yeah.
I tried to look at it from a perspective as a grown up,
Mm-hmm.
when you're working hard and you're trying to just make ends meet, and you got a family to be responsible for, prosperity may be your main focus. But when you're a kid in high school, you're just looking for some kind of guidance, because you don't really know what the world is going to be when you become an adult. You just know that you're on the cusp of becoming an adult. And I'm talking about like being 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
You know, I'm about to graduate high school. I don't necessarily know if I want to go to college. I don't necessarily know if I really want to go into the military, but at that time I felt like I didn't. I
Mm-hmm.
just know I had to do something, right?
Yeah.
So that was the main focus on my mind at that point in time, is like, what am I going to do? And as I said before, you go to church for comfort. So I'm
Exactly.
kind of looking for some comfort. And at that point in time, we're just talking about money. So that's
Yeah.
what kind of started throwing me off about it
Mm-hmm.
in that particular church. But I had been to so many different churches throughout my journey after being in the Catholic church for so long. Like, we left St. Mary's, and then we went to Holy Angels, which was another Catholic church. Holy Angels is where I started, my whole mortal sin, venial sin, and it started to dig in deeper while we weren't necessarily reading the Bible. I started reading the Bible on my own time a little more, trying to figure it out. But the Bible isn't written in a storybook fashion.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In my opinion, depending upon what Bible you get, it can feel like parables, excerpts,
Mm-hmm.
poems. It just feel like a whole bunch of different stuff. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then that's when we converted and we went to different churches. And as we went to a church and we had a particular problem, it didn't throw me off from church. It just threw me off from people. I just got into a point in life where I started becoming more disconnected from the church.
Yeah, I so agree when you say people go to the church for comfort. And I was living in New York, and I was going to this church, and they had several different priests, like maybe five different priests. And,
Hmm.
they would rotate who would do, the sermon on Sunday. And
Hmm.
this one, he was the pastor of the church. He always talked about how much Jesus loves you, how much God loves you, everything.
Uh-huh.
And I love that.
Yeah.
And sometimes the man would repeat the same homily. Like he would have
Oh
said the
no.
homily, and then like maybe 3 months later, he would say the same homily again. And so then I wasn't even critical of it because I was like,
Mhm.
you know what? I think that this still needs to be said, you know?
And you know what? It's funny when you said that because that's what thought hit my mind. Like I laughed, but at
Uh-huh.
the same time I was like, well, there's probably some people there that didn't hear it, so it's not like it's bad
Right.
words.
Right. I don't know if I told you this, I probably did, but I had a coworker. He would be like a devil's advocate. And he would say, well, Christians say that if you don't believe, if you don't accept Jesus as the Son of God, then you're going to hell. And
Hmm.
so, I would say, well, I don't believe that. Well, that's what the Bible says. And
Right.
so then we would go back and forth. I made an appointment with a priest at this church.
Hmm.
And we went, and a few priests, they were like, no, I'm not going to touch that. When I called, and the priest
Yes.
that I just mentioned, he had moved to a church in DC. This was in New York City where I was, where all this was taking place. And
Hmm.
so one priest, he was new, he agreed to meet with us. And he basically just agreed with my friend.
Uh
And
huh.
he was very condescending to me. And I ended up writing to the priest in DC
Uh
and
huh.
saying, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And he sent me back an index card. Okay.
What?
And the index card said, God is love.
That's
but
funny.
but I also wanted to say that here in Atlanta, me and mom would go to this particular church, and one day that we were members of, one day they showed an abortion video,
Oh.
an anti-abortion video. And I was
Oh.
just so upset. And
Yeah.
I sent an email. This was right before 9/11 because
Hmm.
I remember, because the next time I saw the priest, it was 9/11, when they had a
Wow.
special service, and like the day after or 2 days after. But I just said, I just think that's horrible. What if
Yeah.
someone was raped and they had an
Yeah.
abortion? You don't know what the circumstances are. And regardless, I'm not coming to church to watch an anti-abortion video
There you go.
on
That's
Sunday
that's the
morning.
key. That's the key.
you
That's the
know?
key. I mean, whether you agree or disagree with abortion, at the end of the day, that's not why I'm at church.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that I have with churches, to be
Mhm.
perfectly honest with you, is that certain people in leadership try to put their beliefs on you. And by me not being a follower,
Mhm.
just that mentality of not being a follower, as soon as I see flaw in your leadership, I distance myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
Period. I put no stock in you whatsoever
Yeah.
because I know you're a person.
Yeah, I was about
And
to
so
say we're
I'm supposed to,
human.
right. So my relationship is supposed to be with God. I
Mhm.
follow God. I don't follow a man. And even though you're a vessel,
Exactly.
for God, I may take these things from you that God has spoken to you to give to me, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean I put stock in you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where my distance from church came from. And that's
Mhm.
pretty much
Mhm.
it.
Well, I want to go back to how you have such a great ability to be present. And
Hmm.
so with that in mind, share how you handle worry and stress.
Oh, definitely. I may be a little abnormal, and I only say that because of my conversations with people. Um, full disclosure, I feel like our family is just a family that loves to have conversations.
Mhm.
Like it could be about anything as long as it feels like it's something of substance. And
Mhm.
so I love having conversations, just deep conversations with anybody. And when I say deep, it doesn't necessarily mean to the core of who you are, but just something that could be very opinionated and I can just see where a person comes from. So, in having conversations with people, I realized that a lot of people stress over things that they can't control.
Mhm.
And me, by nature, I was just born, I guess, to not feel that way. Like, if I can't control something, I can't stress or worry about it because I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. And in
Mhm.
my experience, when you say you have a problem today,
Mhm.
and you're really worried about it, it's getting you down, it's truly affecting how you operate and move, it's affecting your sleep patterns, how you want to eat, so forth and so on.
Mhm.
2 weeks from now, 9 times out of 10, just putting an arbitrary number on it, you don't feel as bad about it as you did 2 weeks ago. Like
Right.
you're over it, you're past it, you've dealt with it, you've coped with it, and you didn't necessarily do anything because you had no control over it in the first place. Time just passed and you were good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking specifically about those things. Things that you can control, you definitely need to do your best to control. But when
Mm-hmm.
you know it's something that you can't do anything about, I I suggest you don't worry, and I just don't worry about
Yeah.
it.
It's something in your makeup where your thoughts don't overtake you.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the way I do that is I focus on other things that are going on in my life at the moment. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? So, like, say for instance, it's something that's going on with my job that I can't control. It's just the nature of the business. Like we're having layoffs, we're having cutbacks, something like that. Well, I can't do anything to make myself not get laid off, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm performing at a high level anyway. There's very few of us that do what I do. So at the end of the day, if they're gonna cut me, they're just gonna cut me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't come home with those problems, right? I
Mm-hmm.
can't put that burden on my wife. I can't put that burden on my kids. I can't put that burden on the people that I interact with day to day. So what I do is I focus on what's good with them.
Right.
Like, if there's some happiness, some extra happiness going on in my marriage, I lean into that. If there's some extra happiness or growth going on with my kids, I lean into that. If there's something extracurricular going on that entertains me, I'm a big sports fan. I'm a big fan of technology. Like if there's a like March Madness is about to come up. Let's say I'm stressed out at work. When I come home and I watch TV, I'm into those games because
Mm-hmm.
it helps me take my mind off of what's bothering me that I can't control.
Right.
Just
Right.
give you an example.
Right. And so you're not putting a lot of energy into it, which
I
can,
can't. I can't.
yeah.
I'm a big person that's affected by energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's something that I know, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if energy is bad around me, it normally tends to make me angry before it makes me sad. And
Mm.
because I have like a way with words, I don't necessarily. I'm very good at expressing myself when I'm angry.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for me to say things that are true but don't necessarily need to be said.
Mm-hmm.
So in moments like that, when I know I have bad energy around me,
Mm-hmm.
I try to stay away from it
Mm-hmm.
to protect those around me that I don't want to hurt. And just, I just don't like being a mean person.
Do you feel energy? Because I feel energy, but do you
Mhm.
do you feel energy? Like, can you walk into a room and feel the energy in the room, or feel the energy, of another person?
More so than feeling it, I feel like I see it, right? Like,
Mm.
so what you would describe as a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
I would have to describe as visually. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to necessarily explain it,
Yeah.
but it almost feels like it's coming. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
ever been outside and you're playing as a kid or you're a runner, so you're outside running, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you look at the sky and the sun is out, but there's
Yeah.
something about the sky,
Yeah.
there's a smell in the air.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, yo, it's about to rain.
Mm-hmm.
And you finish up your run and you're not even thinking about raining, and all of a sudden it's raining. And
Right.
you're like, damn, the rain was coming. That's how I am about energy. It's like I can walk into a room, something doesn't necessarily look right in people's behavior or
Yeah.
just the atmosphere, and then it's coming. And then when it's coming, it's coming. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
It's not like unless I leave. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's the only action I can do. I can't deflect the energy
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but I know it's coming.
Right. Right. Right.
It could be positive too. It doesn't necessarily have to be negative. Like you can
Right.
walk into a room and it can uplift you. Like, but you can see
Mm-hmm.
it like, oh, this is
Yeah.
where I need to be in this moment. Like
Yeah.
I was feeling a little off, but everything is picking up.
Mm-hmm. Certain terms I'm not totally clear with. Like I wonder is what you were describing, is that clairvoyance where you see
Mm.
things? Is that clairvoyance? I've been
No.
told that I'm clairsentient, where you
Okay.
feel things, but I do see things. I mean, sometimes I'm looking straight at stuff like you just described, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, this is what I see. It's there plain as day, but I
Yeah.
don't know if other people see it, but I don't see how they couldn't.
Right.
But
But you know what's so funny?
hmm.
Just in life, we're all unique, right? We're all told that as kids, and it feels real simple, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like God's made you different. Everybody's made differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times in my growth in life, the biggest thing that I've done is I've never tried to make myself feel extra special. I try
Yeah.
to make myself feel normal. Like I operate in life like I'm no better than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But from a non-arrogant perspective, as you go through life, you realize that there are unique qualities about you that other people just won't understand because they don't have, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty in being who you are. So like
Mm-hmm.
there's something that you can tell me about you that I don't experience, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily mean I don't believe it. And two, that doesn't necessarily mean a lot of people have that ability either.
Right. And I
You know what I
I
mean?
think that feeds into what our respective purpose is.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I do, which
that's
is
interesting.
that's helping me shift into my healing questions.
All right.
So, I know we talked about your relationship with God. Speak again. How would you describe your knowing of God? I know you said you know what you believe, but how would you describe your personal knowing of Him?
I've always felt him around me. And so in life, I don't know if you look at life this way, but there are examples or experiences or things that you go through that God shows you that he's present.
Mm-hmm.
So you call upon him in a certain situation, you're you need help in a certain situation, you're looking for comfort in a certain situation, and you ask God for it and you get it, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the evidence of it in a simplified way. It's deeper than that, but that's kind of like what it is to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, that's why I believe in God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people think that because you don't go to a religious institution, whatever religion you believe, that you're not close to God. And a lot of times I believe those institutions or those places, just from the structure standpoint, can be a distraction from what you're really looking for. You
Right.
can really get that from interpersonal conversations with people, self-reflection, meditation, whatever you feel that helps you get close to God. If you
Mm-hmm.
do that, I feel like that's what grows your relationship and your understanding of who you believe God is, as opposed to just going to some place where somebody is telling you this is what you're supposed to do to get close to God.
Right. Right. Right.
You know?
Do you ever feel God's presence?
Yes. I feel a certain it's funny you asked that question. To be honest, the biggest way that I feel God's presence around me, and I don't know if I've ever said this out loud, there is a protected feeling I feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just to give you an example, a few months ago, this happened to me. I was riding on my way to work. It's like five something in the morning. I'm on a bridge. What we have is a something rare in the state or in the United States. It's a bridge tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you ride over a bridge. The bridge turns into a tunnel, and it puts you on the other side of that body of water.
Mm-hmm.
So they're stopping us before the tunnel. I'm just riding like any other morning. I've been going to the same job for 7 years. So, just to give anybody an
Mm-hmm.
idea of how often I've been doing this, an average of 5 days a week for 7 years. And this day, the lady from VDOT, the Department of Transportation, comes out to stop me. I'm the first car to stop. As soon as I stop, she cringes. I get smacked in the back. I get hit by another car,
Mm.
not seeing it come or anything like that. She walks to the side. You know, I look. She's like, "Are you okay?" She's almost in tears. She's not crying, but she's almost in tears. Like she really has a distraught feeling on her face. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all right. I just feel tackled." She's like, "Okay, do you think you can? Are you sure? You want me to get medical?" She goes through that whole process. Eventually, I move my car. I get out. I see my car is messed up really bad. I got hit from behind, and basically, I got hit by another car, which pushed a bigger car into me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were really worried and, just asking me about it. And I was just pretty nonchalant about it happened already. I'm good. I'm cool.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to let people know. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I feel a protection around me that I felt since I was younger. Growing up as an only child until I was 12 and, I got a brother. I I grew up in an only child way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I live with my mom, and so it's just me and her. And when I go outside to play, when I do anything, I'm alone. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
unsupervised, not like in a weird situation like what normal kids go through. Like
Yeah.
if you're a parent and your kid goes to basketball practice, you're just not around. They're
Mm-hmm.
out there in the world. That's just
Mm-hmm.
what it is. in the world, I feel protected, and I feel that protection is from God.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's protecting me other than my rationalization of he created me. So that's the protection. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel a certain level of protection from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
And that car, your car was totaled, right?
yeah, my car was totaled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's things like that, man. I mean, and I'm a human being, right? I got
Mm-hmm.
anger. I got all these other emotions. I'm not without, quote unquote sin, flaws or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that I walk my life in what I deem to be a righteous way.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that purpose is to raise kids, to come across somebody that's important that may change the world or whatever. But whatever it is, I feel like I'm protected.
Yeah, yeah. And I was going to ask you, and that speaks to it, like, when do you think you experienced a miracle or a blessing and you thought, I had nothing to do with that? God totally did that.
Ah, man, every day, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But in different situations, I remember when I was younger, I was at a mall. Somebody tried to take my coat with a knife. I just pushed the knife out of the way and just walked away. Um, I was like 10th grade, something like that, 15, 16.
Yeah, yeah.
There's been situations where, me, like when I was younger and in my 20s, when I would go to a different city, I would want to go out. And when I wanted to go out, I wanted to go out. Like I wanted to be wherever,
Mm-hmm.
wherever my people were. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in situations like that, there's a protection that you feel. Like I'm not going there to do anything malicious, and I feel like I'm just protected. You know?
Mm-hmm. Because you don't know
Um,
what kind of atmosphere you might end up in.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I've had like my tonsils removed, and I know it seems simple, but anybody who's ever had a surgery, that is an unsettling feeling to be on a bed on your back and somebody putting anesthesia on you. And
Mm-hmm.
anytime that I've ever had a surgery with anesthesia and I woke up in a rage. Like I
Really?
ripped out. I've had two surgeries in my life, and in both situations, I woke up with blood all over me,
What?
and didn't know why until I was told. Yeah, ripped the IV out, fighting. I have a bad
Oh, you
reaction.
caused the blood because you were ripping
Yeah,
things out.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bad feeling. I hate surgeries.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so, there's a protection there, man. Like when you go into surgery, you can't take any of this stuff for granted. You got to
Right.
look at life as like it's real. You ever been in traffic for an hour and you're just mad about it?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, God's probably preventing me from being in an accident.
Right.
God's probably preventing me from being in a situation where, it could have been life threatening. I just look at my life like that, man. We're all blessed each and every day, no matter
Yeah.
what religion you believe in. I feel like people are born all over the world,
Yeah. And
and God makes himself present just
right.
as God, you
And
know.
I've had a recent thought about you, and I think we talked about this. I think that if you had a windfall or like a financial windfall, or you had like some opportunity where you were doing in a profession that you wanted to be in and it was millions of dollars, that you would happily take that. But that's
Hmm.
not a um uh and I think when we want prosperity as human beings, we think that's going to get us to a place of contentment.
Right.
And you define prosperity in different ways than the average person. And family has a lot to do with that, and contentment. And could you speak to that a little bit?
Prosperity is the best word that I could probably use for it. Some people would be like, I'm rich in money, I'm rich in spirit, that type of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
it's very true. I feel like my life is my life, and whatever happens in it is for me, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you can look at people that have millions of dollars from whatever, whether it's business, whether it's sports, whether it's entertainment, and you see that they still have all these problems. Like they can mentally not be there, they could spiritually not be there, they could go through these different bouts of depression. And a lot of people want to attain that money because they think it'll do something for them. Me personally, I love my life. I love me for who
Mm-hmm.
I am, and
Mm-hmm.
that's all I have to do, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
love my interactions with my family. I love being around my kids. I just love like just being myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so money doesn't do anything from that regard. Money is only a means to get what you need in life. whether that's food, whether that's a bigger place to live, whether that's transportation, but it's not about the flash element for me
Right.
because there's other things that I'm focused on. I'm focused on like what's going on now, how I can become better, how
Mm-hmm.
can I educate myself in many different ways, you know, to be
Mm-hmm.
more faceted and well rounded. You
Yeah.
got plenty of people out here that can have a conversation about money, but they don't know what's going on in Africa. They
Right.
don't know what's going on television. You got plenty of people that knows what's going on in pop culture, but they don't know what's going on financially. They don't know what's going on spiritually. A lot of people just focus. They do
Right.
a lot of extreme
Singularly.
focusing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
singularly. And
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm just going through. So whatever piques my interest at the time, I just feel like that's like my life's journey. Like I said before, you know, you may look at something as being normal to you, but it may not be normal to a lot of people.
Do you think that God has a purpose for you, for yourself or for others?
Yes. In many ways, I feel like this time in life, I feel like I'm honestly, my purpose is to assist someone or some people, but not a lot of people. That goes into the why I feel like I'm protected. I feel like I'm here to be here for somebody in particular or
And
or a
what
few people.
do you have an idea of what that looks like or what that is?
Whatever it is, I feel like I'm supposed to give them some information and
Mm-hmm.
protect them until they have whatever understanding they
Mm-hmm.
have, right? Like to give you an example of of what I'm talking about, right? A lot of people revere people like Malcolm X or
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King, right? We'll go with Martin Luther King. Okay, so Martin Luther King is the civil rights leader that everybody pretty much knows in the United States of America. But we don't rarely talk about his parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about who helped protect him, feed him, shape him, mold him to
Right.
become this great person.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm in the position of that. And I'm not even necessarily talking about my kid or
Mm-hmm.
my kids. It could be it could be my children. I may be an uncle to somebody. I may be maybe my best friend will have a child and I'll be that person to them.
Right.
I just don't know yet, but
Yeah.
I'll know it when I see it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not necessarily about even fame. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
It's about a change or a shift
Yeah.
or you know, you never know, man. There's doctors out here, like not to date the podcast, but right now there's a big COVID-19 coronavirus scare that's going around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people look at it like, hey, it might just be the flu. Other people look at it like, hey, this might be a possible pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's doctors that are working on this. And one of those doctors at some point in time is going to figure out a method to stop the spread of it
Right.
or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
The person who raised that child or the person who was influential, like the person who made that person want to be a doctor, doesn't even
Mm-hmm.
have to be their parent. That person is not going to have the credit that they deserve for inspiring this person to be who they were going to be. You get what I'm saying?
Oh
But it's
yeah.
all through God. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's purpose in my opinion.
You know who
You know,
I think about that, I think along those lines is
who
Barack Obama's mother.
I do too. I've
Yeah.
definitely thought about that.
Yeah. And I think
When
it's
I
so
see pictures, I see it in her.
you do you?
When I see pictures of her, I see her importance
Yeah.
in her. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's so I don't know, it's so amazing and ironic to me that she's not a black woman.
Right.
She's a white
Mhm.
woman or was a white woman and she raised this man,
Mhm.
for me this phenomenal man who was the first black president of the United States. That's
Mhm.
incredible.
Yep. It's like that, man.
Mhm.
Even when you talk about just race relations in general,
Mhm.
I think a lot of times people try to divide themselves and forget the connections that we have as people.
Yeah.
So, say for instance, you talk about the civil rights movement. A lot of times you see black people that definitely deserve recognition. Like I'm 100% for that. And you look at these pictures and they're just tons of white people in the crowd that we never know who they are, never know their names, that were standing
Right.
right beside these people in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
That's the togetherness and effect that people have that can change the world, that just don't get the credit.
Right.
But somebody's going to have to get the credit. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I feel like I'm one of those type of people
Mm-hmm.
is because I never had a desire to be famous.
Right.
I never had a desire to put attention on myself,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that that's a part of doing that. Like, to be charismatic, to be Barack Obama, there are certain aspirations that you have to have in your personality and your spirit to become that. While
Right.
his mom has to have a different skill set altogether to be able to nurture a person like that and see a person like that and understand that she's supposed to instill certain things in him so that
Mm-hmm.
he can become who he's going to become. Even though they're both individuals, she plays a role with that.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean?
I know we have to go soon. I want to ask you another
Sure,
question that might take us down another road. But
I'm fine.
do do you think that there's, like, even though we each have a purpose, like maybe an individual purpose
Hmm.
through God, do you think that we're all one? Do you think there's a oneness among us as human beings spiritually?
uh, I would like to. I would
Uh-huh.
like to think that.
Mm-hmm.
Do I honestly believe that?
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. I detach myself from people that I find to be despicable.
Mm-hmm.
So to say yes 100% would be a lie. But I do feel that there are lifetimes, there are other things that play a role into it, whether you look at it from a reincarnation standpoint, whether you look at it from a heaven standpoint, or other religions that I don't understand what they feel like their afterlife will be or what the cycle of life is.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like there's a oneness in that, right? But at the same time, I'm on Earth and you just did something nasty, then we're not connected.
Exactly. Yeah, no, no.
So that's
I agree. The reason that I asked you is because as you were talking about how you don't have a need for that notoriety, I was thinking about this. I haven't brought this person up, but there's this spiritual teacher named Muji,
uh-huh.
and he gives these talks and he answers questions, and he's just amazing. Okay.
Hmm.
So I was listening to him take this woman through this process. She wasn't praying. She was standing up. He was sitting down. She was in the audience, and he was
Hmm.
trying to help her connect with the spirit of God within herself and
Okay.
understand what that entity is and the reality of it. And I'm listening to it as I'm getting dressed in the morning. Okay. So it's not like
Hmm.
I'm moving around and stuff, and I'm still
Hmm.
experiencing what he's sharing.
Uh-huh.
And so he would ask her questions, and he's like, so she'll be like, you're connected to this spirit in you. And then he'll say, so is that a thing? Does it have form? He's trying to
Uh-huh.
get her to understand it's formless and different things. Right. So to put a pin in that for a second, sometimes in spiritual conversations in the groups I attend, we'll talk about losing our identity. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
here as a human being, but if,
Hmm.
the closer we get to the true reality of God, we may lose the isness of who we are. Like I may lose the Adrian, and I don't know
Yeah.
if I want to drop my personality or drop who
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
And so when he was taking her through this, and I'm going through it too, I'm
Hmm.
feeling this presence that he's talking about. And he starts asking about your personality. I can't remember his exact
Mm.
words, but he starts asking if it matters. Or he asks her, do you feel that oneness?
Wow.
Does your identity matter here? And so for the
Wow.
first time, I really understood in that space of
Hmm.
no.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
I care about this,
Yeah.
but no, this doesn't
Yep.
matter. And
Hmm.
so I just felt when you were talking about doing for someone else and
Hmm.
how the recognition isn't important to you, that came to
Right.
me. I thought about that.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting. I
yeah.
I mean, that's cool because it's like those two things I probably would have never linked together, but
Mhm.
because they're your experiences, I see it now that you've explained to me. I definitely can see the connection between those two things. But
Mhm.
I didn't even look at it in that manner or that way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean. it's funny because it's just something I think about weird stuff like this. I was watching the news, and the oldest man in the world that's documented, he was 112. He passed away. So the
Mhm.
next man that's about to be the oldest living man right now, he's 111, and his birthday is on March 29th, and he'll be
Mm.
112, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I was just thinking to myself how like a lot of people would love to be famous and love to be like, give you somebody arbitrary, LeBron James, right?
Mhm.
You get all this love from all over the world. You play a sport. You're a global athlete, right? Like you could go to China and it's like, millions of people that know who you are and they just want to be near you and touch you, right?
Mhm.
But, and you got a lot of money and you got a lot of success. But then you got this man who nobody really knows that has seen 112. Well, hopefully we'll get to 112, but definitely he's already seen majority of 111 plus,
Right.
years of life. Like you can't even put a price on that. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Like just technology from what this man has seen from the
Mhm.
early 1900s to now is
Yeah.
just probably amazing. And so I'm not trying to be weird or nothing like that. But like if you just put some kind of weird conversation out there, like who would you rather be? I'd rather be the man that's 111. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And there's some people that's like, nah, I'd rather be LeBron James, and nobody's right or nobody's wrong. And I
Right.
don't want to be anybody different. You're just talking about an experience,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Think
Yeah.
about stuff like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, last question.
Okay.
You may not even think of yourself in these terms, but are
hmm
you a healer or a seeker or both?
I'm both. My mind is that of a seeker,
Mhm.
but what I put out to the world is that of a healer.
Mm.
I feel like I'm the type of person that if you have a deep connection with me and you're in my circle, and I don't let a lot of people in my circle because of the whole energy conversation we had.
Yeah.
I can help people if they're open to it see life in a way that they may not see it based on their personality because of how much I know about them through observation. That's the
Mhm.
best way to put it. It's
Mhm.
like if I know you enough and I have enough conversations with you, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean I know what you would do in every situation, but I
Mhm.
know how you think about life. And because I paid that much attention to you, I think you may be looking at it from this perspective, but you may want to look at it from that perspective. And I never tell anybody anything in absolutes, but usually when we have that kind of open conversation and people
Mhm.
trust me to do that, they'll be
Mhm.
like, damn, I ain't look at it from that perspective.
And
You know,
yeah, so in that way you're helpful. You feel
I'm
you're
helpful
helpful.
and yeah, and that's a type of healing, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't necessarily always look at healing as physical, but sometimes you got to help people heal mentally, and that mental health space that I'm talking about isn't necessarily they're depressed or anything. It could just be something that was bothering them that now took a light weight off of them.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
they might have been walking around with a 10-pound weight on their back. And if I took that 10-pound weight off their back, to me, that's a form of healing.
Mhm. Mhm.
But that's just how I look at it.
And are you, as a seeker, is it that you're seeking to grow?
I'm always
And
seeking to grow, but I'm seeking to learn about people and my
mhm.
connections with people. I
Mm.
think that's my biggest thing in life is just trying to connect with people that I care about in different ways. But there are different obstacles and different blocks that everybody goes through that might make
Mhm.
that connection difficult.
Mhm.
You and I, we have a really cool relationship, and it's funny how it happened and how it grew over the years because you don't necessarily think that you love your family, right?
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily know that when I'm born and, I ain't gonna say how much older you are than me, but you know what I'm
Well, you're
saying? Not
making it
because you're
sound
not,
like I'm,
you're not,
35
you're
years older than
no,
you.
no, you're not, you're not. But I wasn't trying to play you
Yeah,
like,
I
what I'm saying,
know.
if you want to say it, you can say it. But it's like you think that gap is big when it
Yeah.
happens, right? Like,
Mhm.
cause you're a grown woman, but you're just coming into womanhood, right? And then
Mhm.
by the time I'm a grown man, it's just like, wow, we're closer in age than I thought. We're closer in a connection than I thought. And it's so cool because you try to have that kind of relationship with a lot of people, but you may not necessarily have it. It's just
Mhm.
personalities and what you're
Right.
looking for in life.
Right.
Like I can
Yeah.
say conversations that we may have had 10 years ago were very instrumental, or longer than 10 years, 10, 12 years ago, were very instrumental in us becoming closer because it was like I'm not a judgmental person, number
Mm-hmm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you're talking about, I'm just willing to listen, and vice versa. You're not a
Right.
judgmental person. So whatever weird or different thing that I might be thinking, instead of you just being like, I can't believe you believe that, you're like, okay, I hear you, but I think X, Y, and Z. And then
Right.
fast forward 5 or 6 years, you'll be like, yo, you totally changed from that perspective that you had. I like to see that you grew in that way. And the
Yeah.
stubbornness in me is like, nah, I was always like that. But at the same time, I understand that there's definitely growth in it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what's so cool. And you don't get that in life. You know what I mean? You don't get
No.
that kind of connection with everybody, you know?
No. And I think as time goes on, I'm becoming more and more aware of how relationships matter in everything.
Yeah.
That you have to work at your relationship.
Yep.
I don't care who it is. If it's a
Yep.
coworker, if it's
Mm-hmm.
for me, it could even be somebody who's not living and I still want to have a spiritual relationship with. I
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing to engage if they're
Right.
there. So
Right.
you and I have cultivated and we've cared about
Yeah.
our relationship. So we've taken
Yep.
care of it. And
Definitely.
it evolved. It wasn't like a decision, but it became
Ro-
something that was inside,
Right.
like a subconscious intention. Yeah.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. It's like, you start off, you care, because of bloodline and family relationships, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that two people want to engage in working on it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Some people look at relationships from a very selfish perspective, and people that I find look at relationships from a selfish perspective, I don't engage back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like I keep trying. Like I just be like, all right, this relationship is what it is. And then I keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got some friends that you talk about the same thing with all the time. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
calling my friend for this. And then you got some people that you don't know where the conversation is going to go, but y'all just need to talk because
Right.
you want to talk to that person because y'all
Like
share
that.
many different interests in life.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I love you.
I love you too. And of course, you're welcome. I mean, I don't feel like it's a thank you, you're welcome situation, but definitely.
Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can listen to all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and our podcast YouTube channel. Also, send me an email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, let's start healing.